Danny Austin back on the podcast once again in high demand. I have seen you all over. You were on X's and Argos, I believe. You hooked up with our boy Ben Grant and had some fun over there.
I
Uh,
like
t-
that guy.
yeah, he's smart, man. He does great work. We're lucky that he actually reached out to us, which I think is the only person that reached out to us and was like, "Hey, can I like contribute to you guys?" I was like, "Oh my god, yes, this is perfect." So he's doing great stuff. You're doing great stuff as always. We'll push all of your stuff out here on CFP in the description, in the bio, and all that good stuff. But thank you for coming back again because, man, you have an interesting team on your hands right now.
Man, is it ever? Like it's so like I started covering this team in 2016, so I've only covered like pretty unimpeachable Stampeders teams. Like even when Bo went down in 2019, it was like good news how Nick Arbuckle played. And this is honestly the first time where it's like, oh, this is what it's like to cover a team with some adversity. Like this is different. This
Mhm.
so yeah. So I mean, it's got me in some people's crosshairs right now. There's been the good old social media fighting going on, but yeah, it's been fascinating. It's been super fun, and I do think that it is a really interesting team.
I love that you don't shy away from that stuff because I just hate all conflict. So the second that anything happens, I'm like, I turtle and go, this doesn't feel comfortable. I just want to go back and watch some more game film and hide by myself. But we'll get to what's going on with the starting quarterback situation going into this Friday nighter at McMahon. Again, the third game in a row at home for Calgary. But first, I want to ask you about specifically Bo and the injury because just before we turn on the recording here, we were just kind of bouncing around the idea that not all injuries are the same. And for anybody that thinks that Bo would have played in week 2 or even finished the game in week 1 after Charleston's knee hit his leg, knowing he had a break, that's so ridiculous because you don't do that with your franchise quarterback in week 2 of a shortened COVID season. Dickinson, yeah, he's tough when he played and he believes in toughness as a coach, but he's not an idiot, Danny. So the idea that anybody would suggest that, yeah, it was definitely broken, they knew they asked him to play through it is ludicrous, is it not?
It's asinine. Like I don't even know what word to describe. I don't know how it got out there. Like for about 24 hours on Tuesday, I was off Tuesday. Really bad timing. Um, I had to do a video shoot that had been organized for a month, and you have camera guys, so you can't do it. But
Whoa,
it's
what were you video shooting?
I was helping out a law firm with video bios.
Ah,
So I was doing like video interviews, not journalism, but Buddy's law firm, and he was willing to pay me. So it had been
amazing.
booked. Yeah, it had been booked for about a month, and we had cameras and all that. So anyway, so it was my first question on Wednesday. It was like, Dave, can you clarify? Because honestly, I know Dave Dickinson. Like, I don't know. Maybe there's a coach out there who would put their quarterback in that situation. I just did not believe for a second that the Stampeders were aware. This is what we were saying. Like, man, a fracture doesn't mean there's a huge crack in the bone,
Mhm.
right? Like that we do. I don't know the extent. I know that the Stampeders are pretty sure that Bo's not going to be out 6 weeks. They thought that it was sort of very deep muscle bruising or potentially soft tissue, so that's what they were looking for, and they didn't see the fracture. I don't know how much swelling would have done, but if you're not looking for a fracture and you're not doing an X-ray, then you're not going to find it. So I don't think there's that much controversy here. I don't like. I don't really understand why. Like, as you said, if you know Dave Dickinson, he's a player's coach, he's a quarterback's coach. There's a 0% chance they're risking him in week 2 against the BC Lions. Like it's just not happening. And Bo doesn't want to play in that situation. Bo just had the worst game of his career. He doesn't want to put himself through that. I think there's a lot to take from that game and from the decision making. They clearly must have realized that Bo was in really bad shape at some point in the game, and I think it does speak to their confidence in Michael O'Connor that O'Connor was not thrown in right
Mhm.
away. That's not to say that they don't think that he can be ready, but they clearly didn't think he was ready at that in that game. But yeah, I mean, look, Bo had an injury. I'm not going to say it's bad luck. Maybe they should have done an X-ray. That's for their medical team to decide. But no, the Stampeders did not know that Bo Levi Mitchell.
I mean, when I was in university with Tyler Crapina, he had his plant leg get submarined by a Guelph Griffin, and I watched his leg break and face the wrong direction. Like,
Yeah,
there's lots of levels of that stuff, right? And for Bo to even stand up after he got hit there, I would blame it on adrenaline, but wasn't really adrenaline. It wasn't like a high energy play. It was standing in the pocket, throwing a ball. I don't even remember if it was completed or not. But the thing that's amazing to me too, we forget when you are watching. I was actually talking to Dave Foxcroft, of course, our sponsor here on CFP with Fox 40 the other day, and I said to him, "What's it like standing in the backfield as a lead official in the CFL when you have Willie Jefferson and Jackson Jeffcoat flying off the edge to go and try and hit McLeod Bethel Thompson. Because I'm like, you know that you're not in danger. You're far enough back, but you have the best seat in the house. We forget how physically freakish a lot of these pass rushers are. And I bring that up because apparently when Charleston Hughes is going at like 30% of maximum effort and not really trying to hurt you, if his knee just hits you in the wrong place, he'll break your leg. And like that drove home to me how stupid and how violent this game is. And the fact that anybody walks off of the field healthy to me is incredible after seeing how little impact he tried to make on Bo and what it did.
Yeah, I mean, I never thought of it that way. Like, I didn't look. There's a reason I'm not a professional football player. I'm not seeing my teammate's leg get twisted backwards because that would literally scar me for life.
Oh,
I'm
it
not
broke
that
me.
tough.
It was we were in
Yeah.
first year of university, and several of us in the middle of a game started crying. Like we're like early 20s, and our friend who we lived with and was our roommate Tyler Capina
Oh
breaks his leg, and we start like breaking down on the field, and our coaches were walking around going, "Yo, there's still a game to be played," and I'm like, "I don't give a damn, man." I'm like, "I just saw my friend's leg snapping out."
Yeah, that's
So
disgusting.
yeah, it's
It gives me the
brutal.
shivers. Yeah, and I mean, as for the like, I don't think anyone is mad at Charleston Hughes for what
No,
happened there, right? Like that was it's bad luck, and I mean, I, I seem to be saying everything is bad luck right now. But like, I honestly like Bo wasn't mad at the hit. And I mean, I asked Bo, like the first question I asked him after the Lions game was like, "Are you okay physically?" Because like we've never seen you play like that, and he was missing throws, right? I mean,
yeah,
which I assume is that he couldn't plant his leg right. You know, his weight was off, and he was just doing more work with his arm than he normally should. That's sort of what I suspect it was. But
yeah,
I asked him, and he literally was like, "Well, like Mike Riley's hurt right now. Like everyone's hurt, right?
yeah.
Everyone is hurt in football at all times. That's my general impression. It's an insane sport. Only crazy people play it. I'm convinced none of these people are just like normal everyday people because no one would put themselves through that.
Yeah, and to your point, like you say that you're seeing that. I went back through after, hindsight's 2020 when I found out the leg was broken and I went, okay, let me watch the throws back again. So I watched every throw that he made in that game and it's spot on what you're saying, Danny. It was he had no confidence in his lower body. He didn't want to rotate and twist and drive off of his back leg. He didn't want to rotate through his front leg, which totally understandable. Like when you know that something doesn't feel right, but the idea that he was even doing any of that with a broken leg to me is just, it's crazy that he was able to battle through that. But yeah, I mean, he was doing more with his arm than he should have. But the thing that really jumped out to me, especially late in the game when they're behind and they're trying to fight back in, is this Bo is this wildly entertaining gunslinger. It's why we love him, and it's why other people's fan bases hate him because if he ends up coming back against your team like he's done to so many Hamilton games before where I've been calling the game on radio, it's because he takes shots that a lot of other quarterbacks don't down the field and challenges defensive backs, forces you to make a play. We remember that play in Hamilton a couple years ago where he just chucks it as far as he can. Courtney Stephen pass interference. Great, let's kick a field goal and get the hell out of here. And it's like he makes you force the issue. And in the fourth quarter of that game last week, when I started to realize he wasn't physically right, he would take the snap in the shotgun, shuffle backwards a step or two, not really do a normal drop back, bouncing around on his toes like he usually does. And he would throw a check down into the boundary to Ante Milinovic leader, or it would be to Kadeem Carey. And it was just like, let me stare down the defense with no interest in actually throwing down the field and then find my running back for a gain of 6. And he was moving the ball down the field. But at that point, BC was saying, go ahead, man, throw as many 6-yard checkdowns as you want. We're going to wait until the clock runs out and you can't win the game this way. So for him to take the easy stuff when he knows they want him to take the easy stuff, I'm like, that's not the way that Bo plays ever. And that's when I started to wonder what was up.
Well, and it's interesting because like when you're watching and you're not aware that his leg is hurt, you obviously begin to construct narratives in his head. It's, oh, he doesn't have the Eric Rodgers who he trusts to do
Right.
that too, right? Or like something's wrong with him mentally because he's thrown a couple interceptions and all that. And then we have a physical explanation for why he was doing that. And I was not concerned after week one at all. Like I thought the Argos are a decent team. It's week one. You haven't had preseason, whatever. And then I was deeply concerned. Now, I mean, I'm concerned about their playoff possibilities, but to be honest, like this season may be a wash. Like I don't think Bo Levi Mitchell is done. It's weird to me how many people are insistent on constantly writing him off and saying that the game has passed him by when like he's never been bad when he's physically right. Like I just don't get it.
Yeah.
And you have a way more, like nuanced understanding of quarterback play, but yeah, it seemed to me like he knew he couldn't make those throws.
Yeah.
And I think that if you're gonna throw up a ball where I'm not gonna say 50-50 ball, but that your receiver is gonna have to go up and fight the DB for the ball, that it needs to be perfect. Yeah. And I think he knew he couldn't throw those balls. So it forced the Stampeders into a style that doesn't, maybe it works for a little while, but eventually you get to the red zone and you got to get it into the end zone. And I think the Lions were very confident that he couldn't do that.
It kind of reminded me of something that I learned a long time ago while coaching kids football camps, which is if a kid goes out there and doesn't perform and gets angry or gets sad or whatever it might be at the camp, that's okay. Like that's a natural reaction. If a kid goes out there and they're having the time of their life, best possible scenario. The thing you worry about is when the kid becomes disinterested. Like when the kid is sitting on the side of the field and you say, "You want to do?" "No." "Why don't you?" "I just don't." And like as soon as they have no, and the thing that jumped out to me was when Bo lost the confidence to make those throws. Again, hindsight 2020, because we now know he was hurt. He lost interest in pushing the ball down the field. And when he loses interest in doing that, and they're not challenging vertically anymore, it's a completely different looking offense. Like it's a complete shell of the one that we understand Dave Dickinson to run over X amount of years.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. The most fun version of Bo Levi Mitchell is normally the one where they're behind. Mm-hmm. And we only get to see it every once in a while. But I mean, it's always when we were constantly having those Mike Riley versus Bo Levi Mitchell, Michael Riley versus Bo Levi Mitchell arguments, it was sort of like, well, the Stamps at the time in 2016, 2017 were up by teams or by 20 points in the second half, so you never got to see it. So he sort of looked like just a game manager because that's what he was doing. He was running the clock down most second halves. But then every once in a while, you would get a game where they needed Bo to push the ball downfield, to do that little, like when he has to scamper around a defensive lineman, find space, and just it's magic. It's normally amazing to watch.
There's nobody more dangerous in the entire CFL moving towards the line of scrimmage, I'm convinced, than Bo. Like every time that he takes, shotgun, 5-step drop, defensive ends fly up the field, and he sees a lane to step up and keep his eyes down the field, when he does that, he throws dimes, which is why the Keontae Harden interception on the left sideline in the end zone was so concerning, because that was him. As soon as I see Bo anytime on the television copy, on game film, when he starts moving towards the line of the scrimmage and patting the ball like this and lining it up, as soon as I see that, I'm like, oh shit, he's about to make a game-changing throw. 90% of the time he does. So when he gets intercepted on that, and it was, I believe, interception number 3 of 4, I'm like, okay, I don't remember seeing that, but yeah, when he is moving and bouncing around in the pocket, totally different guy, totally different player. And unfortunate that we didn't get to see that really through the first 2 weeks in its totality, and now we have to wait until probably after Labor Day a little bit to see. And by that point, who knows what the record is? And then he comes back and he's battling as we get towards the colder weather. I mean, like you say, let's not call off the Calgary Stampeders season. There's lots of potential there, but they've certainly had kind of like the Ticats 2017 0-8 kind of start, where it's like quarterbacks dinged, injury here, injury there, slow start, turnover in this game that cost them, close loss in this one, and you go, okay, what the hell's happening here?
Yeah, well, and I can tell you, I mean, the Stampeders, like Dave Dickinson in particular, like they lost by a combined 9 points, I believe. Yeah. I think I saw that earlier, and they had so many procedure and offside penalties. Like I honestly, every time it felt, even with Bo hurt, they had a couple big plays, and then the next play they would lose 10 yards on a procedure penalty or something like that. And they don't think they're that far off. Mm-hmm. They really believe that. And the question is whether that matters if it's Jake Mayer. And the answer is, I mean, we don't know. Anyone who tells us, like, I've watched him in practice, sure, but if you're going to ask me, can Jake Mayer win games for the Stampeders? I have absolutely no idea. I think the defense can win games. I think that Kadeem Carey, if the O-line holds up, can keep them on the field. But I have no idea if Jake Mayer is in.
Well, this is where we want to go next, which is, of course, the backup quarterback that was listed as the backup quarterback, who, when given the opportunity to be the starting quarterback, and everyone thought he would be the starting quarterback, was not the starting quarterback. Not everybody.
Not everyone.
Danny was. We were talking about this before, and I basically said, you are someone, this is why I respect so much your work, Dan, is because you don't jump to conclusions. You just wait until you actually know something, or because you have good local sources, which is very important in modern journalism because there's less and less and less of that, that you lean on those local sources and trust them because you know that they're giving you good information. So, well, I am guilty of it, as many other people are, of running around waving the Canadian flag like we did for Nathan Rourke, going, "It's happening! It's happening! We're getting another one!" You're like, no, let's wait, because you're talking to people who are saying, just wait. Like we're not really sure. We're going through our process here, and the process ends up in Big Jake getting the start, not Big Maple Leaf.
Yeah, and I mean, like, thank you, first of all. Like, I never said that Michael O'Connor wasn't starting. I honestly was just
you're anti-Canadian, is what we're trying to say.
I hate Canadian quarterbacks. That's the thing. When Andrew Buckley retired, I was just thrilled. No, I honestly think that Michael O'Connor had an opportunity to win the job this week. I do also think that it would have been crazy for the Stampeders to have just automatically named O'Connor. Like, have the competition this week. Make these guys work for it and reward the guy who does the work. And that's very much what I was told was happening. So I did not say Michael O'Connor is not starting. I just said there's a competition going on. They're going to make that decision at the end of the week. And that's ultimately what they did. It was a weird week here. Like, Monday's practice was canceled because of the forest fire smoke was brutal.
Yeah.
Then they had a practice Tuesday, which, as I mentioned, I was not there for. And then they had a full practice Wednesday. And like by Wednesday, I'd say the reps with the starters were probably 50-50. And, I didn't count, but like Jake Maier was more efficient. The offense looked better under him. So I don't think there'd be any surprise. But I do think that this was straight up. How do I say this? I don't know how much the Stampeders valued the fact that Michael O'Connor has played the Canadian game, like if that gave him an edge, or if the fact that like Jake Maier is the all-time passing leader at UC Davis, and has played in some massive, massive games, and maybe he can make those adjustments if they keep the playbook a little bit tight. I don't know what ultimately went into the final decision beyond they felt that Jake Maier overperformed, and I do sometimes think that people need to, if you're picking your fantasy lineup, take a look at the local beat reporters.
Yes.
First.
Yes.
Because we're the ones who are at practice, and I'm not saying that any of the national guys are, wrong or always wrong, whatever, but the local beat reporters tend to, not be relying on some sources, but have others who are on the ground a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, you're dialed in. It's natural, right? It's not an insult. It's the fact that you guys are there every day. And I know what that's like from covering the Tiger Cats when I was on radio. And I just had a better sense for them than any other team. It didn't matter whether it was just down the road in Toronto or if it was 5-hour flight away in BC. I just understood Hamilton better because you're just there and you just see these little things that add up over time. But it is interesting to me, the idea that, I joke about Michael O'Connor being listed as the backup quarterback and then not getting the chance to start. We have this perception that if you're the backup on the depth chart and the number one goes down, that inevitably you just get bumped up. Sometimes that's true, but situationally in the Canadian Football League, I don't think that that's always the truth. And why I say that is that the backup quarterback obviously is handling short yardage for a variety of different teams, not in BC, not in Saskatchewan, not in Edmonton, but they're
always in Calgary.
Yes.
Always in Calgary. Always.
So you end up going with the short yardage quarterback essentially, and like Michael O'Connor's a dream as a short yardage quarterback because he's he might think that he's wiry if you watch him because he's so damn tall. But I've stood next to Mike. I've shook Mike's hand. He's a big dude. Like he is thick. He just happens to look long because he's a tall guy. So he makes a lot of sense as the short yardage quarterback, which is really what the number 2 is in Calgary. And then when you get the opportunity to open up the playbook at practice and see what guys can do, then there's a great possibility that maybe Jake Maier just went out and won the thing straight up with some better throws and some better reads. But I also know, and this is what I kind of want to ask you about Michael as a player and what you've seen, again, because you're dialed in at practice and being around the team throughout training camp, is I've talked to Mike before when he was at UBC. I've seen him at the combine and talked to him about the game a little bit. He's a quiet guy. Like he is Absolutely. So reserved and down to earth. And you might say, okay, well, he's relaxed and never too high, never too low. And that's a good thing a lot of the time in quarterbacks. But I'm just wondering whether or not that played in at all to the decision. And obviously, you don't have an answer for this, but just the idea of that playing into the decision where you've got an 0-2 football team that might need a bit of an emotional jolt with your starting quarterback, your franchise quarterback down with injury. And inevitably, in a football game where your starting quarterback's not playing, something's going to go wrong. So an offensive lineman's going to take a bunch of procedure penalties. You're going to have a fumble the when you shouldn't from Kadeem Carey. You're going to throw a bad interception for a defender you didn't see. Somebody's going to get injured. The game's going to slow down for 10 minutes, whatever it might be. There's always adversity. And I'm wondering whether or not they looked at Mike and they said, we believe in you as a quarterback. That's why we signed you in free agency. We like you. We want to develop you and work with you. But you just might not be right for this situation, one that requires maybe a bit more of a verbal leader, a vocal leader, somebody who can get up, not necessarily in guys' faces and grab their face mask, because that's a one-way trip to getting beat up by your offensive lineman, but someone who has a little bit more emotion to their game. And I don't know a damn thing about Jake Maier, but I do know that Michael's not that guy at this point in his career. And it almost feels to me like outside of the actual on-field tangibles of what they saw in practice that helped them make the decision, it might have factored in too, where they're just saying, okay, how is he going to lead the huddle in a Canadian Football League game with all this pressure at home with a crowd that might be hostile if Montreal goes up the way they did on Edmonton as well? Like, that's a bad spot to put him in for his first CFL start. I almost feel like they might be protecting him in this spot.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent. So it's interesting. I talked to Blake Nill this morning, sort of before that final decision, just in case I needed that story. And like, man, does Blake ever have faith that Michael O'Connor is ready? He talks about him going to U.S. prep school. I think that Michael, as he said, he's quiet, and I'm not saying to a fault, but like as a media guy, he's quiet where you're like, come on, man, like give me something, right? Like he is.
Video of Bo announcing that his leg was broken and Michael O'Connor sitting at the desk looked like a hostage video.
It was wild. And yeah. And Jake Maier is not that. And I mean, Jake, like, honestly, watch his best media availability I've ever had with a quarterback. He's so good and so about positive thinking and all that. I will say that Dickinson was asked, and I can just read you the quote because I think it's interesting in relation to what you're saying. He was like, honestly, I don't care if they're calm or not. I just want production. Michael's a good player as well. He's ready to go. I just want the guys in your huddle to have faith in your quarterback. That's the big thing. You can be calm. You can be jacked. Everyone has their own personality. I know I was different than Jeff Garcia in the huddle and felt like both of us could get the job done. I'm similar with this group. Just go out there and be yourself. Make the plays that are there. Trust what you see and let it go.
Interesting.
So that's it. But I mean, what's Dave going to say, right? I mean, like, there's always, I appreciate you giving me a great quote, but you're also not going to come out and say, like, well, you know, if Michael had a bigger personality, he'd be in. Like, that's, you're not going to,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But I do think that's there. It's hard for me to say when it comes to that personality stuff, but Jake definitely gives off that air of, you know, I was the starting quarterback at a college school, was probably a bit like, I believe in myself. I know what I can, you know, I know what I'm capable of. And Michael is quieter and more analytical. And again, I firmly believe that Michael O'Connor will one day, whether it's for the Stampeders or someone else, I believe he's going to start for this team. It could be as early as next week if Jake Maier plays badly.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as I know, it was one in practice. It was the throws that they made. So
Interesting. Yeah, it's just such an interesting dynamic when you have a franchise guy that everybody knows and wants success for, a backup Canadian kid who's not just your typical Canadian quarterback. He's this big monster with American, high school and otherwise training in Penn State and UBC and Vanier Cup 2015 and all these. He's not your average guy. And then you got this rambunctious 88 touchdown, 33 interception, all these yards, all this school record stuff from Cal Davis down there. And it's like, man, it's amazing to think of that quarterback room and the dynamic, because when you're going into training camp, you're thinking, okay, Dakota Prukop's in here as well. We got Bo. Let's figure out the rest and we'll see how it goes. But, Dave said throughout training camp when Bo was dealing with the ground, like, I know what I got in Bo. I don't really have to worry about that. It's the other guys we got to sit down for a couple of days here.
And
well, now you got to worry about Bo, and now you got to figure out what's behind Bo, and you got to do it on the fly. It's like, man, that's a tough spot to be in.
And it's a question that's not even worth me asking ever because I'm not going to get a straight answer. But I mean, I am curious, like, if they could have looked into the future, I think Dakota Prukop was clearly the most CFL ready right now. If you want my honest, I mean, I can't say that for sure, but he's got the experience. He's played. I mean, the fact that Edmonton picked him up so quickly speaks to the fact that, it wasn't, I'm not alone in thinking he's pretty decent. it'd be hilarious if he's starting Labor Day against Jake Mayer. Who would have seen that coming? But yeah, I mean, I'd be curious if they would have kept him had they had any idea that Bo was about to fracture his fibula, because like I ultimately I you can probably win with either of these guys. I'm not trying to say you can't, but I'm sure they would have liked more time. Yeah. And anyone who wants to compare this to the Nick Arbuckle situation, Nick Arbuckle was the backup quarterback for an entire season. Like, he knew the system. He was ready to come in and play. And I'm not saying neither of these guys are, but the resume suggests that they're not ready for it the way that Arbuckle was.
Yeah, vastly different situation for sure. What are the attributes of Jake Mara? What should people be looking for in this Friday night game from what you've seen of him at practice and throughout training camp?
Yeah, so he's a smaller guy, right? He's 6 feet tall. It's very funny. Like, the way that it was described to me by Bo Levi Mitchell was, of the three, he was most similar to Bo. Like, he moves around the pocket a little bit, but only to get free. Don't expect him to be running 30 yards. Big arm, loves to huck the ball, but is similar to Bo. Like, that's honestly the one thing that we've got in is he's not gonna get you that many yards with his feet, but he's not the big thing that everyone gets wrong about Bo is Bo moves just fine.
Yeah.
He moves in the pocket, moves in and out of the pocket. He just doesn't take off for yards. And I think that's Jake Mayer. But man, like, accurate with his throws. Like, he hits the receivers in practice. So it's hard from where we are to actually get an idea of like how he is going through his read progressions and all that. But like, from my did not play college quarterback like you did, like, I don't think hitting the receivers is going to be the issue with him.
Yeah, and that's interesting because my next, I guess, thought that we'll have to watch when we go into game on Friday here is decision making, right? Because if you can hit the receivers and you're accurate and you can move around the pocket, then there's a lot to work with there, and it's just a matter of whether or not you can get through progressions and understand what Dave is throwing at you and how much he keeps in the game plan and how regular it is and how much he peels it back and the play card on his wrist goes back a couple of steps. I don't know. We'll see, but it will be a lot of fun to see his progression, because honestly, I did not have on my bingo card week 3 of the CFL, because we looked across the CFL, Danny, at the start of the year, and we went, yeah, we know who all of the starters are outside of maybe Toronto and maybe Hamilton. But even then, there were strong leanings as to who we thought would start the season. I didn't have my bingo card week 3, guy I know absolutely nothing about that I've never seen make a single throw starting in a game on Friday Night Football.
Yeah, and like when we talked preseason, like the thing that I said was, I was like, I think the Stampeders are fine as long as their key vets stay healthy. Well, Jamar Wall's their defensive captain. He's out for 6 weeks. Now Bo's out for 6 weeks. I mean, like, this has been about as disastrous a start as you can get. And it's not just that Jake Mayer is getting his first start. Leon Johnson is starting at left tackle because Ucombre Williams is out. It's his first CFL start. So you've got a really good Montreal pass rush. I mean, at least against Edmonton. They looked good. Against a rookie left tackle, and Julian Good-Jones, who's over on a right tackle, hasn't practiced this week because of illness, so they may have to play Bryce Bell, who's a rookie playing his first game and is normally supposed to be a guard.
I didn't even know Bryce Bell was out there. He's a Laurier boy, isn't he?
Yeah, I believe so. So, and they did. I mean, they said they drafted him for his versatility, but it's possible that, like, again, Neela Kazatati was supposed to be there, retired. It's possible that they're on their third option at right tackle and their second option at left tackle with a rookie quarterback. Like, people want me to say that this game is going to be interesting, and like, maybe it is, but Josh Huff is sick. Like, it's possible that the Stampeders just don't have the horses right now.
Nice. Nicely done. That, I don't want you to spoil the lead in your article coming out on Friday night, man. Come on, save the good stuff for the print, okay? I didn't even buy you anything here. So
in Calgary, just make horse references in the city.
Last one I got for you here. I do want to ask about the city itself. And I always laugh when people would ask me this question about Hamilton, because the question is, what's the mood of the city, of the Stampeders fan base, all the rest? And whenever people would ask me that, I would imagine that they think I'm walking around like a stand-up comedian doing a bit for late night television with a microphone, like sticking a mic in people's faces. Go, how do you feel about the Stampeders? And then hoping that you get a funny answer, and then, back and forth we go. But I do have to ask the question, because people have noticed that the stands have been a little up, little down, little back, little forth,
Uh,
trying to feel it out. Is it because of COVID stuff, Alberta numbers? Is it because of return to play? Is it because there's other stuff to do? It's summer. Every market has their challenges. And I'm not basing this strictly off of attendance numbers, but I'm just wondering, like, if this game doesn't go well for Calgary, Montreal comes in, a team that you're not used to seeing having a lot of success against the Stampeders. Calgary's not used to losing consecutive games at home, 3 games at home, losing to teams from the East at home. Like, all of these things are a little bit foreign. How do you gauge how people are feeling right now around this team?
I mean, it's hard. Like Montreal games are upside down world for Calgary. Like honestly, like they always lose in Montreal. Last year, like there was a fight between Winston McManus and Tommy Campbell that turned into an all-out brawl
Oh
before the
yeah, I
game.
forgot about that.
Yeah, Montreal won both games against Calgary in 2019.
Yeah,
So and like I like Montreal has a swagger to them, like that I
yeah,
really really like, and I think Calgary is much more. I don't want to say they're buttoned up, but I think that like Calgary is more of like we're a football team. We carry ourselves like that, and Montreal sort of seems to walk in and just talk trash and like try to get under their skin, and I do think it works a little bit at times. So like I'm really looking forward to this game because the upside down world suggests that everything I just said about Calgary not having the horses means they're just going to go out and play great. But they're always the biggest prize in terms of like fan interest. I do think that attendance is relevant. I think Thursday night games in Calgary are tough. Thursday night games when there's smoke are tough. Honestly, like I'm from Ontario, so I know there's I was participated in cottage culture and camp culture. It's different in a place where there's like 9 nice weeks of summer. Like
yeah.
people want to get away on the weekends. They want to go to the mountains. That's why you live here. So I always think like summer attendance is a little bit. It's going to be lower than you want it to be. Labor Day is where it gets going. And then I'm also hesitant because I have commented a couple times just to friends. I was like, yeah, I don't see much presence in terms of billboard advertising or stuff like that around Calgary. I see less marketing than I'd expect. But I also know that like the Stampeders have really focused on digital marketing. So like maybe it's not a surprise that we see less of that because they're actually being smarter with how they use their marketing dollars. Like Labor Day is its own event. Labor Day is going to do great. People are going to be excited for Labor Day. I don't know that there's a huge buzz right now. My social media numbers are doing pretty well. People seem to. I can say
Well,
that.
that's just because you're covering up sales of teams. That's why.
Well, that's yeah. Again, I like the funny thing about that is like I genuinely somehow I've become the guy who like says there's no sale. I think there probably is. Like I think we're onto something. Like I want to be clear. Like I'm sure that if there was a buyer for this team, there'd be a good chance that they'd sell. Who wants to foot the bill for a new stadium right now, right? Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't like. I think there's an excitement among the fans. I am curious a Friday night game when the weather isn't great. I actually think that's better for the Stampeders than a Friday night or a Saturday afternoon where the weather is beautiful because I think people will then go to the mountains. So we'll see. But I mean, it's just hard. Like, what's going to engage Calgary when you've had the last 10 years? People are just so used to success that, I think there's a sense of like same old, going into the season. And now it's hard to read because if Jake Meyer, I mean, if he goes out throws for 450 yards, maybe that'll get people talking. But
Yeah.
yeah. But I don't see. I'm just not going to lie about it. Like, there's not a huge buzz.
Yeah, it's totally fair, and I think we get that sense as well just watching on the television, and you wonder how that can, and everything usually ebbs and flows, and man, there's been a lot of flows for Calgary over the last long time, right? So we'll see where it goes from here. I do love your note there on the swagger of Montreal, though, because I think you have the same sense that I do. My favorite thing to happen so far this year with Montreal off the field was when Almondo Sewell makes the comments, of course, about Trevor Harris, and then in a Herb Zurkowski article, he asked Kahari Jones, like, how do you feel about players talking about their opponent before a game coming up like that? Kahari just said, I don't give a damn. That's got nothing to do with me. He's like, I'm focused on coaching my football team. And I'm like, that's such a great response because I read the article and I read it in Kahari Jones' voice of him shrugging and doing exactly that through a Zoom, being like, I couldn't care less. That doesn't impact me at all. He's just worried on the things that do and his team specifically on the field. So,
and like, yeah, two things on that really quickly. First of all, Herb was here today, was in on the Zoom. Like, God, that guy's good.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, he's good. Just the way he asks questions just gets better answers than anybody else. Best in the business. But secondly, like that Montreal team, it's one of the things that throughout all the XFL talks when people said that the Montreal market is bad. The Montreal market is not bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you need a win. And like I've said this story a couple times. I was there in 2019 when it was a crazy game, but like the fans were packed with like a young, diverse crowd.
Yep.
And I just remember as the lights went down, they all started holding up their phones. It's like I don't go to music festivals, but I guess that's a thing.
It's
So
a
I thought it
different
was really,
city, man. It's a different like, and all they need is like cool jerseys and techno music, and they're good.
and they're good. They're just gonna have a great time, and they're gonna like look good doing it, the whole thing. So like I'm actually like there's nothing that could be better for the CFL than honestly this Montreal team getting hot early.
Yeah.
I think it would be great. I think it's too bad Hamilton's not performing because I would have loved a little bit of a Hamilton Montreal rivalry, which we may still get because I think that Hamilton team has some swagger too. But yeah, it's exciting. It's good for the league that Montreal's off to the start that they have been off to. Yeah. So.
I'm with you on that. My favorite Herb Zurkowski moment, by the way, on a Zoom was this year in the preseason call for the Montreal Alouettes, where he left himself on mute unintentionally. And then when he unmuted himself awkwardly 5 seconds later after someone said, "Oh, Herb, you're on mute," he unmuted and he said, must have been the commissioner who kept me muted. And I was like, it was just such an unwarranted shot. I was like, what is he doing? That has nothing to do with, he's on a Zoom call with like 30 other media people. And I'm like, I don't know who he was making that joke for. He's just doing it for himself to make himself happy. But I'm like, all right, man, whatever. Sounds good. But Danny, keep doing what you're doing, man. I love catching up with you always. And I know it's going to be a lot of fun for you writing about whatever the hell happens on Friday night there with our boy Mayer.
Man, it's going to be, honestly, like the Arbuckle stuff was so much fun when he came in. And like, look, I hope Jake Mayer or Michael O'Connor, who, you know,
who knows?
One of the two of them. No, it's going to be Jake. But if Michael gets in, I hope one of these. I hope they show well for themselves. That's all I hope. It's more fun whether the Stamps win or lose. It's more fun to have like a young guy actually succeeding. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Absolutely, Danny. Thank you, man. I appreciate you.
Peace, buddy. Always.